the Mahindra XUV300, a car which offers you great features, a very refined and peppy diesel engine, as well as strong looks on the outside. But can this car be the king of the compact SUV segment? Well, we decided to take along the Ford EcoSport with us to find out the answer to this question. Well, compared to the Mahindra XUV, the cabin of the Ford EcoSport feels a little narrow in comparison, and the quality also seems just a touch behind the Mahindras, but that's quite okay. In isolation, it is quite decent, the quality, and fit and finish is overall pretty good, but it's just that because we are comparing today, the Mahindra is slightly ahead. But one area where the Ford EcoSport is ahead of not only the XUV300 but all other compact SUVs is in the infotainment department. The touchscreen here is sensational to use. It is a brilliant touchscreen. In fact, it's as nice and as smooth to operate as an Apple iPad. The menus are very well marked. It's a silky smooth system to use. The visibility, the legibility of all the fonts is also very good, and it really is the best system out there on any car up to rupees 15 lakhs. Well, so in terms of seat comfort, it's almost neck and neck between both these cars. In terms of the overall ambience, the XUV300 just feels a little more posher, a little more sophisticated, and a little more upmarket than the Ford EcoSport does. It also has a little more to talk about the features. You get dual zone climate control, which the EcoSport does not offer. You also get different light settings for the gauges. You can of course change the light color over here. That's also something which the EcoSport doesn't get. But the EcoSport and the car also come with the same feature, which is of course the tire pressure monitor. That's something that both cars have. One advantage that the EcoSport has over this one is the touchscreen. Now the 7-inch device here is quite okay, but it's not got the same kind of slickness or the same kind of sophistication or ease of use as that car. But yes, for sheer features, if you are of course fighting with the brochures, if there's a debate between the Ford EcoSport and the XUV's brochure, then the XUV will slightly win it because it has these additional features. It also gets 7 airbags as standard, which is one more than the EcoSport, which has only 6 even in its top end version. Well, if you've been following my reviews for the last 5 years, then you will be knowing that I always tell you my height when I sit in the back seat, and my height preference is 5'10", and for someone who's about 5'10" or 5'11" or even 6 feet, the knee room here is just about adequate. It's definitely behind the XUV300 in terms of the knee room, and it is much tighter than all its other rivals as well. Now there is a little bit of place with the front seats where I can stretch my feet, and in isolation it's quite okay. It's nothing which can be called a deal breaker, but because we are comparing it with the XUV today, this car is definitely behind. Well, so when you compare this car with the EcoSport, you'll immediately notice that the cabin feels a lot more wider than that car. So this is a much better car for having 3 occupants abreast for those long journeys. Knee room also is visibly a lot more than the EcoSport. Headroom is more or less the same, but knee room really is a lot more. So you'll prefer the seats on this car over those long journeys. For short trips, the EcoSport is okay, but for longer journeys, these are the seats that you'll prefer. The cushioning also seems a little better, and the under thigh support also seems slightly ahead of the EcoSport. So if the EcoSport is an 8 in the backseat department out of 10, this one is clearly a 9. In terms of boot space, it is the Ford EcoSport which has the clear advantage. It offers you a boot space of 352 litres, which is almost 100 litres more than the Mahindra XUV300. So clearly, in the boot department, it is the EcoSport which has the clear advantage. Well, so one thing is for certain, that if you are someone who enjoys driving his or her car, then you should simply close your eyes and buy the Ford EcoSport. If you are of course in the market for a compact SUV, no other car, not even the Mahindra XUV300 can take this car on for sheer driver involvement and sheer driving thrills. And why do I say that? Well, simply because the steering wheel is really crisp and nice and very responsive. It's a very sharp and very agile steering wheel. The chassis also feels very sporty, it feels very agile, and this combination of a sharp steering wheel as well as a very agile and sporty chassis means that if you want to change directions quickly, this car will do it for you. There isn't much body roll, so to speak of. It is of course a compact SUV, so there will be a little bit of body roll, but it is negligible and it's always under control. the grip from the tires. Remember, this car comes with low profile tires, but the grip from the tires is phenomenal. If you're pushing this car into corners really fast and you're carving out those corners, doing higher speeds than usual, this car will put a smile on your face. It really is a thrilling car to drive. And what also makes it a great car to drive is this gearbox. This lovely manual gearbox on the diesel is fantastic to operate. It's got nice, crisp and short throws. It feels very sporty. In fact, you'll just be changing gears for the heck of it sometimes, because you'll be enjoying the whole thing of changing gears. So you'll just be changing them for the heck of it and have a smile on your face while you do it. Now today we're talking about the diesel. We're comparing both the diesels. Now this car makes about 100 bhp from its 1.5 liter engine, and the good point about the EcoSport, or the advantage that this car has over the XUV, is that the diesel on this car doesn't feel like a diesel. It feels like a petrol in terms of responsiveness. Now this car starts responding from about 1600 RPM, which is very good for a diesel engine. And this responsiveness from the EcoSport is very good for a diesel engine, because most diesel engines start responding after 2000 RPM, including the XUV300. And this nice and responsive nature makes this car an enjoyable car to drive, not only on the highway but also inside the city, because you don't have to change gears very often, and also you don't have to wait for that power to come in once the turbo spools and goes after 2000 RPM or beyond 2000 RPM. So it is a nice and lively car to drive in the city as well. Now in terms of power delivery, this car has very good mid-range, the EcoSport. But if you want ultimate refinement, it's not the best car anymore in the segment. The XUV definitely feels a little more refined, a little more quiet inside the cabin. Not that this car is bad, but because of course the XUV is a much newer engine and it is a recent engine, that car feels a little more refined inside the cabin. Well, so the difference in performance between both these two cars is as stark as the taste between apple and oranges. Yes, the Ford EcoSport is still by far the best car for keen drivers in this category. Now, it's not that the XUV300 is dull to drive or boring to drive, far from that, but it's just that it doesn't have that same kind of driver involvement or that same kind of keenness about itself that the Ford displays. In isolation, it's a decent car to drive, but yes, it doesn't have that same dynamic that the Ford has. Now, the steering wheel on this car is very light. It's ultra light, and even if you decide to choose the steering modes over here and put it to sport, it doesn't tend to become too communicative. It does become a lot more heavier, but it doesn't really become very communicative. So it's best to use the steering wheel in the comfort setting over here, which means that you won't feel tired at the end of a long day. Unlike the Ford, which has a really communicative steering wheel, this one is best to drive in a sedate manner. Now, in terms of power, it is the XUV300 which has the advantage. In fact, this is now the most powerful diesel compact SUV in its space, and in fact does feel quite quick once you get it going. It's just that you need to rev it up to about 2000 RPM for the engine to gain some momentum and the car to pick up speed. Before that, the engine really is very lazy, and that's something that even the Marazzo has. So it is the nature of this engine to feel lazy below 2000 RPM, unlike the Ford, which starts feeling really lively and becomes very responsive from around 1500 RPM. So this one does take time. Where it has the advantage over the Ford is in the overall suspension setup. Now, at slow city speeds, it does soak in the bumps better than the Ford. The Ford has a slightly stiffer suspension setup, so that car is better on the highway. This one feels better in the city, but on the highway, this one also feels decent. But of course, because we're comparing today, it is the Ford which has the advantage on the highway in terms of outright stability. Now, not only is the steering wheel on this car really light, but as I just said, the gearbox on this car feels nowhere as sporty as the one on the Ford, and Mahindra has done a good job with the car overall. But in terms of drive dynamics and drive involvement, it is the Ford which has the advantage. This car is quick, it is refined, and it definitely has the power, but for sheer thrills, you'll still stick with the Ford. Now, if you decide to push this car into corners, there's plenty of body roll happening, so that's something that you'll have to be ready for. It's not a sporty compact SUV, it's more of a comfortable cruiser, and the big advantage that this car has over the Ford EcoSport is the fact that you get a 6th gear, unlike the Ford which only has 5 on the manual. This one gets an extra 6th, which gives the engine a lot more flexibility. So on the highway, the engine on this car seems a lot more relaxed and a lot more flexible and a lot more quiet than the one on the Ford, which really seems very buzzy and a lot more busier than the Mahindra. And if you're doing about a 90 or 100 kph speed on the highway, then this engine is spinning at about 1800 1900 rpm, making the cabin really isolated. In fact, for sheer cabin noise isolation, it is the Mahindra XUV which has the advantage. There's no tire noise, hardly any wind noise, and absolutely no engine noise, making this a delightful cabin to be in, especially for those long highway trips. Well, so if you're in the market for a compact SUV, then the Ford EcoSport still is the best choice for you. If you consider yourself to be a keen driver and want a thrill-a-minute kind of a ride, it really is the best driver's car in the compact SUV space and definitely ahead of the XUV in that department. That said, if you want comfort, a long list of features and a slightly more refined diesel engine, then the XUV300 is the car for you. What I'm essentially trying to say is that it's going to be a choice between your heart and your head. It's bye for now and hope to see you soon.